Good evening. Welcome to our virtual town hall on sharks, beach safety, sharks and beach safety. How about that? My name is Patrick O'Donnell. I'm the Assembly member for the 70th Assembly District, covering the communities of Long Beach, Signal Hill, San Pedro, and Catalina Island. A lot of ocean in my Assembly district, and I hope I'm dressed appropriately for the ocean today up in Sacramento. It's about 95 degrees, so I took the liberty to dress this way today to feel like I'm at home where it's a bit cooler, I hope. But like many of you, I grew up swimming in the waters off our coast, and I've always been fascinated with sharks. As look at TV, Shark Week, right? Shark weeks now, I believe, right? So people have a natural fascination with sharks. But today's event is really designed to give us more understanding of sharks, more understanding that they're part of our environment. We actually want sharks in our waters because they are part of the circle of life. So I'm proud to host this virtual meeting today on shark and beach safety again. And it's personal to me because I'm in the water a lot. I grew up sailing at Leeway Sailing Center, the recreation, Long Beach Recreation Leeway Sailing Center. I actually worked at Marine Patrol for a few years back in my early days. Grew up going to the beach on the peninsula, 70th place down there in Long Beach. So I know our beaches well and appreciate the waters off our beaches and what's in them. And that's really what today's about. It's about giving us a greater appreciation and understanding of what's in the water, our water, what's living on the waters of Long Beach that we need to be aware of and need to be further educated upon. So with that, again, I just want to highlight that this is, I think Dr. Lowe brings this, and Dr. Lowe really has given me this gift, and that's really having a respect for sharks. It's not that there's some creature out there that everybody should be afraid of. You should be educated on shark behavior as much as you can and help us learn more about shark behavior. But again, today is about gaining more respect for the sharks off our waters. With us today here is the famous Dr. Chris Lowe. He is a professor of marine biology and director of the Shark Lab at California State University, Long Beach. There actually is a shark lab at Long Beach State. Probably when things get a bit back to normal, you can actually go visit it. I know they've had open houses and such at the Shark Lab, and it's an interesting place. And he's an expert on shark behavior, and he's got a lot of research going on, not just about sharks, but also maybe some technology, some devices that might impact shark behavior and send them away from our shores when we want them away from our shores. For instance, when the junior lifeguards are out there, right? And things happen, and we need to maybe get the sharks out of the area. Those kinds of devices, we hope, will and probably do now, help educate us on how we can move sharks out of the area. So with that, we also have Marine Safety Captain Omar Naranjo with the Long Beach Fire Department, and he will share safety tips when you are out in the water. Some of the safety tips you should be aware of. And he also has Long Beach lifeguard Bibi with him. I don't know her rank, so I'll let you explain her rank. But we are proud to have you with us today, a product of Long Beach, no doubt. But I want to thank our co-sponsor, Surfrider Foundation of the Long Beach chapter, who's been very active over the years in making sure that we have clean waters off Long Beach and educating us continually on the importance of our oceans and the importance of respecting them. I also want to thank CSU Long Beach, of course, and the Long Beach Fire Department. The lifeguards actually are under the Long Beach Fire Department. So thank you to our Long Beach Fire Department for partnering with us today to make this happen. So without further delay, you didn't come here today to listen to me. You came here to listen to some experts and learn a bit more. So let's get to that. So we'll first go to Dr. Chris Lowe, who will tell us more about the behavior of sharks and their latest research findings in his fine Shark Lab, which is world renowned, growing every day, learning more every day, and making us very proud.
Thank you. So let me share my screen here, and I'm really excited to talk about some of the new things that we've learned about sharks in our waters. So one of the things we know is that there are a variety of different species of sharks that can be found in coastal Southern California waters. Leopard sharks and gray smoothhounds. There are a variety of species that can be found fairly close to the beach. But the ones that usually cause people the greatest concern are the white sharks, or the great whites. So we talk about Shark Week, and in fact, Shark Week it began already, and there's several weeks of this programming. But we live Shark Week. In fact, we've been living Shark Decade, is what I would like like to talk about. So the bottom line is I've been studying sharks for 30 years, and what we've been seeing along the California coast is truly remarkable. I would call it a conservation success story in the recovery of white sharks. So, you know, for the last 100 years, white shark population has probably been depressed off the coast of California and in the Pacific, largely because we caught and killed white sharks. Quite often the young ones were caught and killed in commercial fisheries. And chances are if you ate fish tacos in California in the late 80s, early 90s, you ate white shark and you didn't even know it. But in 1994, the state of California passed legislation to protect white sharks. In addition, their primary food source for the adults, which are marine mammals, were hunted to the verge of extinction by the early 1900s. So seals and sea lions and tooth and baleen whales, all of those species were virtually eliminated from our coastal waters. And they were protected in the 1970s. And since then, many of their populations are recovered. So protection of white sharks and protection of their food has undoubtedly allowed them to recover. But one of the things we've learned about juvenile white sharks that use our beaches as nursery habitats is one of their favorite foods are stingrays. And we have lots of stingrays in our coastal water. So these are all the things that we think that have allowed the white shark population to come back. And this is why we're seeing more white sharks along our coast. In fact, in discussions with lifeguards, we have learned that there are 5 times more sightings of white sharks along our coast in the last 10 years than ever before. In addition, we have one of the most heavily populated coastlines in the world in Southern California. So we have at least 20 million people that live within 40 miles of the coastline. And many of those people use our beaches for ocean recreation year round. And this is unique because there aren't very many places in the country where people can recreate in the ocean year round. So for surfing, swimming, stand-up paddleboarding, bodyboarding, wading, kite surfing, surf fishing, we are constantly in the ocean and sharing the water with the animals that live there. So as a result of having these really heavily populated beaches, it's not surprising that for the last about 10 years, we have seen an increase in temporary beach closures due to shark sightings, particularly white sharks. And what we've noticed is that those sightings are, even though sightings are going up, closures are going down, which is actually a good sign. It means we're learning from the animals that are here and able to give that information to lifeguards so they can do a better job at keeping people safe when they're at the beach. So occasionally people are bitten. It's extremely rare. So we have more people going in the ocean than ever before, and we have more sharks along our coastline due to protection and conservation success. But we're not seeing a big increase in people being bitten by sharks. So in fact, when an incident occurs, it does generate a lot of media attention. And sometimes that media attention is national. And what we've learned is we have some anecdotal data that can result in economic impacts to coastal communities. And right now we've just begun a study to look at what those economic impacts may be. And if we can better understand how those affect coastal communities, maybe we can reduce those economic impacts even when incidents occur. So the bottom line is we've been working with all the lifeguards in California to help them better understand not just the sharks that are found along their beaches, but the behavior of those sharks so that they can better manage beach safety. But unfortunately, they and we as scientists were doing this with a paucity of information. We just didn't know enough about sharks. So what have we know and what have we learned over the last few years? So one of the things we've learned about white shark distribution is that typically in Southern California, from Santa Barbara down to halfway down Baja, we know that in the spring, starting around April, baby white sharks start showing up off our beaches. And a baby white shark is about 4.5 to 5 feet long at birth. And we'll see those babies till about October along our beaches. In addition, we've learned that there are a number of hot spots throughout Southern California, off Santa Barbara, Ventura, Santa Monica, Huntington Beach, Long Beach, San Clemente, and now off San Diego County. So in addition, we know that typically adult white sharks are rare along our coast. Where we typically see adult white sharks around the offshore islands like Catalina and the Northern Channel Islands and around the Central California coast. And that's because at that time of year, adult males and females are coming back to feed on northern elephant seals that are coming in to give birth to their young. Now, in order to figure out where these sharks are going and where they're spending their time, in the Shark Lab, we use a variety of technology. In fact, the Shark Lab is known for developing some of this technology. So one type of tag we use are called spot tags. And if we catch the shark, we can bolt this onto a shark's dorsal fin. And it's essentially a radio transmitter. So every time the fin breaks the surface, that transmitter is transmitting to satellites in orbit. And then it then sends me an email giving me the latitude, longitude, time and date, and the ID number of that shark. Now, when that shark goes underwater, we can no longer get that signal. So the other type of tag we can attach to these sharks are called pop-off archiving satellite tags. This tag that gets darted into the shark's back has a temperature, light, and depth sensor, and it's recording that information every 30 seconds. At a pre-discrete time and date, this transmitter is designed to pop off the shark, float to the surface, and upload all that data to the satellite, which then downloads it all to my office. And it gives me a really detailed information about the temperature and the depth that shark moved through. Now, if we really want to know how close a shark gets to a beach, we use this other type of technology called acoustic transmitters. Now, if we catch the shark, we can flip that shark upside down and put it into a state called tonic immobility. We can surgically implant one of these transmitters into the shark's body cavity, and each transmitter has a unique ID code and produces a sound that the shark and other wildlife can't hear. Now, when that shark swims within about 300 yards of one of our underwater acoustic receivers, the receiver logs the time, the date, and the ID number. So it kind of works like Easy Pass on the toll road. So when you're driving down the toll road, it tells you how many times you drove down that road. So we can use this technology to track sharks as they move along our beaches. And the fourth type of technology we use are called smart tags. Think of these like Fitbits for sharks. And I'll talk more about these in a bit. So in order to get these tags on or in animals, we either have to capture them, sometimes commercial fishermen will catch them. And when they do, my students and I can go down, meet the fishermen at the dock. We can measure the shark, we can take tissue and blood samples, we can tag the shark with a variety of transmitters, take them out, release them, and see where they go. For sharks that are really large, we can sometimes drive alongside them with a boat using a drone or a helicopter to spot. And we can dart transmitters into their backs, and we can estimate their size using a drone. In some cases, we're able to use a piece of net that we can put right in front of the sharks if they're in very shallow water, and we can entangle a specific individual and then process that shark just like we got it from a commercial fisherman. But by far my favorite way, or my students' favorite way to tag sharks, is by working with the lifeguards. And quite often, the lifeguards are out there with their jet skis, their PWCs. We can put a student on the back, and basically using a drone or a helicopter to spot, they can roll alongside the shark, and we can dart a tag into the shark's back. So by using this technique, because these sharks form these aggregations along the beach, it's possible for us to tag 6 sharks in a few hours. To give you an idea how shallow some of these small sharks will come, this student is standing right now. Okay, so using the spot tags, the ones that we bolt on the shark's dorsal fin, we've learned a lot about white shark migration, particularly juvenile migration. So they start off in Southern California during the summer, but then during the winter months, so here we have the month, we have the day of the year, and you can see some of the sharks will migrate all the way down into the Gulf of California. So during the summer, the sharks are quite often moving back and forth along Southern California beaches. And when we get to October, November, when our surface waters dip below 60 degrees, that typically is a cue that initiates a migration south to Baja. So for very young white sharks, we've seen this annual migration every single year. Once these sharks are about 2 or 3 years old, they weigh a couple hundred pounds, they're big enough that they can tolerate Southern California winters. So in addition, we have acoustic receivers all along the coast. We have approximately 120 receivers from Morro Bay all the way down to the Mexican border. And these acoustic receivers are constantly listening for tagged sharks. We have an array around Catalina Island, and we collaborate with the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, which has an array of acoustic receivers around the Channel Islands. So using this acoustic receiver array, we can track sharks along Southern California beaches. In addition, many other scientists use this exact same technology, and they can detect our sharks with their receivers, and we can detect their animals. So I have colleagues in Mexico that have receivers in Vizcaíno Bay, Scammons Lagoon, where the gray whales give birth, Guadalupe Island, all the way up to Monterey to Tamales Point. And we have tagged juvenile white sharks in Southern California that we've detected here in the summer. that have migrated all the way down to Viscano Bay and back 4 years in a row, out to Guadalupe Island, 150 miles offshore, to the Channel Islands, and then all the way up to Monterey and back to Viscano Bay. So using this technology, we've learned a lot about the migratory patterns of these young white sharks that hang out along our beaches. In addition, we found that there are hotspots, but what's really interesting, and we still don't understand, these hotspots shift. So my postdoc, Dr. James Anderson, has done some work looking at our acoustic tagging data. And what we found was in 2010 to 2012, Will Rogers Beach in Santa Monica Bay was the hotspot for juvenile white sharks. And then, really interesting, in 2013 to 2015, we detected no sharks in Will Rogers Beach, only off Manhattan Beach. So the hotspot shifted during those years. And then in 2015 to 2016, Belmont Shore and Surfside was the hotspot. And Captain Navarro can tell you about some of the activity that we had right off Belmont Shore. It was pretty crazy. We had 20 juvenile white sharks right off Belmont Shore. In my entire career, I never thought I would see the day where I'd be able to go out my front door and be able to tag juvenile white sharks. 2017, 2018, Dana Point was the hotspot. And then 2018 to 2020, actually 2021, off Carpinteria and now off Del Mar and Coronado are hotspots. So what we don't understand is why these hotspots are shifting across years. So what I'm going to show you now is some data from 2020. So last year, we managed to tag 53 juvenile white sharks throughout California, with a vast majority of them off Santa Barbara. So I'm going to show you an animation. So here we have the month, the day, and the time of day. And you can see that in the winter, some of the larger juveniles that we tagged were moving back and forth between Santa Barbara, the Channel Islands, and San Luis Obispo. Once we get to summer and we started tagging a lot of young juvenile white sharks, they started hanging out off Santa Barbara, and then some of the bigger juveniles would move between San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, Santa Monica Bay, all the way down to San Diego. So we had sharks hopscotching all across Southern California last summer. So using this information, we're able to figure out that where our hotspots are, where our hotspots aren't. But now we're looking at what conditions make a good hotspot. Now, the great thing about this acoustic telemetry technology is that we can detect sharks with transmitters that last 10 years. So we can track individuals almost to adulthood. The problem was it would take us a month to download all those receivers. And we would come back to the lifeguards and we would say, okay, 2 weeks ago, we detected an 8-foot white shark off your beach. And they would go, well, thank you. That's not very helpful. We need to know when they're there that day. So working with the manufacturer, we developed a new type of transmitter platform. So here's an acoustic receiver that's located on a buoy. The buoy has a cell modem. It has a GPS. And anytime a tagged shark swims by a receiver, instead of a diver having to pick it up to download it, now it sends a signal to the cloud. Our lifeguards are subscribers to a service so that they get real-time information about a tagged shark off their beach. In addition, they can go to a website that will tell them what shark has been at their beach. So for example, it's basically a baseball card with all that shark's stats about where that shark's been, how big that shark is. So here you can see some data from Santa Barbara. Each dot represents a detection of a shark. The gray bars are nighttime. The white bars are daytime. So you can see all these different sharks are being detected at different times of day swimming by this buoy off this beach. This is the software that the lifeguards have. This indicates the number of sharks that were detected that week, how many detections per shark. And then each tile is basically a baseball card for that shark, telling them when that shark was last detected, where it was detected, how big that shark is. So using this new technology, we are now have receivers all throughout Southern California, and our goal is to add more receivers. Because of our development of this technology, now lifeguards and researchers are deploying this off Cape Cod, another location where they have a lot of white shark activity and a lot of beach activity. So the question we get a lot from the public is, why are these sharks hanging out at these beaches? And we've learned from our telemetry that sharks will be there for weeks to months at a time. So our best hypotheses are when these sharks are born, they are completely on their own. We don't know where females give birth. We just know that the babies start showing up at our beaches and can be there for long periods of time. So we have 3 hypotheses as to why. Number 1, they don't know they're a white shark yet. They get no parental care, they get no instruction. So they should be afraid of everything because everything could be a potential predator. The safest place for them to be is in shallow water, and that means along our beaches. In addition, if they're going to spend weeks to months hanging out in this safe place, this nursery, they have to be able to find food, and they're naive to doing that. The most abundant food item that we find along our beaches are stingrays, and we have hundreds of thousands of stingrays along our beaches. These are the #1 things we find in baby white shark stomachs. So we think that this is a readily available, easy to capture food source for them. And in addition, the water's warmer actually right along the shoreline than it is a few hundred yards offshore. So not only is there more food, there's protection, but the water's warmer, enabling them to grow faster. So to answer this question, why my beach? Why are they at this beach and not at these beaches? We employ a variety of technology. So we can put out an array of acoustic receivers. We can tag a bunch of sharks in an aggregation. And if a shark is detected by 3 or more receivers, we can actually get a position for that shark. So we can track individuals. In order to figure out why they're here, is it water temperature? Is it water clarity? We have an autonomous underwater robot, the RVO Townhall, which is programmed to swim along our beaches, move up and down through the water column. It has a full environmental suite on it, and the robot knows exactly where it is. So we can use that to get a 3D map of the water column and ask, why are the sharks at this part of the beach and not at these parts of the beach? In addition, we fly drones over the top of this area. We can survey this area. We can count how many sharks are there. We can estimate their size, and we can look at what sharks are doing in proximity to people. And we always do this in conjunction with lifeguards. So what I'm going to show you is some data that we got from last summer from Padero up off Santa Barbara, a location where we had a big aggregation, probably over 50 juvenile white sharks. And this location is a fairly small spot, about the size of Belmont Shore. We put out this big acoustic receiver array, and we were able to tag 35 individuals last summer at this site. So what I'm going to show you now is an animation from only about 7 days, 1 week's worth of data. So what you'll see is every color is an individual shark that we're able to track within this array over the week. And using this, we can plot this over the water temperature, and we can ask, why are the sharks moving right along the shore? Are they moving along here because the water's warmer? Are they moving there because that's where all the stingrays are hanging out? So by using this technology, we were able to monitor over a dozen sharks for up to 8 months, 24/7. This is the first time this has ever been done. In addition, we're able to map the seafloor. We have temperature data loggers, and what we find is that water temperatures along the seafloor can vary considerably over the course of a tide and over the course of the day. The other thing that we noticed off this location was that surface waters could be as warm as 70 degrees, but the water temperature at 12 or 15 feet depth was as cold as 58 degrees. So this means the sharks had options. If they wanted to warm up, they would go to the surface. If they wanted to cool down, they could go towards the bottom. So by doing this, we're able to get these really high resolution maps and ask, why are the sharks using certain stretches of beach? So here's our underwater robot. This is designed to go out and it will map this entire environment. What we've found is basically the robot will oscillate up and down through the water, and we're able to look at turbidity, how murky the water might be, the salinity of the water. We can look at productivity, how much plankton is in the water, whether there's red tide present, and we're able to look at how much oxygen is in the water, the temperature and the depth. And on some occasions, we've actually had sharks swim right by our robot. Last week, we actually had a shark bite our robot. And if you see online on our social media, no robots were hurt in the process of that work. And probably a shark probably has a few dings in its mouth, but other than that, we're able to get some really interesting information. So what we're able to find at this location is that there was a strong, what we call thermocline. Water's warm at the surface and cooler at the bottom. At other aggregation sites, like down off Del Mar, we do not see this. So why are the sharks in these two locations when we see different oceanographic conditions? So one of the things that we noticed last summer is, not surprisingly, in the summer, water temperatures, so the blue indicates when the robot was on the bottom, the orange and red is when it's at the surface. And you can see that we're detecting about 74% of the sharks that we had tagged at that location. In October, that's when the water got the warmest. And notice that even on the bottom, it was more uniformly warm. But in early November, we had this storm come through. And in one day, a vast majority of the sharks left. 82% of the sharks left in one day because the water temperature plummeted due to that storm. And then within a few days, the water temperature came back up and some of the sharks returned. So some of the other technology that we're employing to answer questions about what sharks are doing off our beaches is what we call our SMOT tag. Think of this like a Fitbit for sharks. This is a device that clamps on a shark's dorsal fin. It has a 3D accelerometer, a 3D gyroscope, a 3D magnetometer, so it gives us a compass heading. It's got a depth sensor and a temperature sensor. It's got a video logger on it, and this points down the shark's nose so we can see what the shark sees. And this stays on for 24 hours, and after 24 hours, it pops off. We can recover it and download the data and basically see what that shark was doing. We can measure how fast it was swimming. We can see that compass heading it was traveling. So in 2018, we tagged 3 juvenile white sharks off Belmont Shore. And here's some of the tracks that we got in 24 hours. Sharks are hanging out along Belmont Shore during the day, and at night would move out around the offshore oil islands, and by dawn come back. So what was really interesting was the video data showed us a 45-degree angle switch. 45-degree angle, the video was at like for probably 20 minutes, and then 20 minutes later, it flipped and go the other way. And we thought maybe the camera was moving. Turns out when we looked at the acceleration data, what we found was that the sharks were swimming in a 30-foot diameter circle in a bank like a plane. And then basically after 20 minutes, we would reverse and go the other way. And 20 minutes later, we'd reverse and go back. And they would do this for 4 hours. So they did this over different depths, over different temperatures, and over different space. And basically what we figured out is this might be how these sharks sleep. So migrating birds, when they continuously fly, will turn off half their brain and will fly in one direction on autopilot. Then we'll turn off the other half of their brain and fly in the other direction on autopilot. And that is essentially how these animals sleep that never stop moving. White sharks must continuously swim in order to breathe. So this may be the first time anybody has identified how a white shark can sleep. So one of the questions we often get, are there certain locations where sharks are most common along the beaches? And what water users are most likely encountering the sharks? To answer this question, we employed a study where we used drones. And we flew drones all along Southern California for 2 years, every single month. We'd fly these drone surveys right along the beach. And my graduate student, Patrick Rex, would point the camera down. And then what we could do is we could count all the sharks that we saw, and we could count all the water users, surfers, swimmers, stand-up paddleboarders, boogie boarders, waders. And then we could measure their distance from the shoreline and from the wave break. And then we could do the same thing for sharks. So we could ask what water users at what locations and under what environmental conditions are they most likely to encounter a juvenile white shark. And by doing that across all of Southern California and correlating that to wave height, UV index, wind, all the things that different water users are using, our human behavior, to decide what beach you're going to go to and what are you going to do at that beach. We believe that in the future, we'll be able to have shark forecasts. Just like you see on the weather report for rip currents, we'll be able to do that for stingrays and for sharks. The other thing that we can do, so here's a survey that we can, where you can see all the different water users, and we get latitude, longitude, altitude, and then working with computer scientists, we've developed machine learning algorithms that will help us identify all these different water users and measure them so we can automate this. These data can also be used by cities to help them know what people are doing off their beach and when are they doing it and under what conditions. So using this new technology, we'll be able to process all that video footage much, much faster. The other thing that we can do with our drones is ask what are sharks doing when they're around people. So for the last 2 years, we've gathered a lot of data of sharks, juvenile white sharks swimming underneath surfers, swimmers, stand-up paddleboarders. And of course, what we've learned is they cannot see the sharks, but we can from the air. Right now, my graduate student's right in the middle of this data analysis. And basically what he's found is sharks don't care. They act like the people aren't even there. So if the surfer is just hanging out in the surf line, the shark will swim right underneath them and won't even turn. So right now we're not done, but so far it shows that these juvenile white sharks, as long as people aren't chasing them around, they just don't care about people. Now, with this increase in shark activity along our beaches, even though white sharks are protected, we have encountered some new conservation issues. For example, We now have problems with fishers going out and deliberately targeting juvenile white sharks off beaches. They're using big tackle. They're even chumming off public beaches and piers. And it is not illegal to do this, yet it is dangerous for other beachgoers. So it's likely that new regulations are going to be required to help keep people safe and those sharks safe while they're using those nursery habitats. In addition, when the sharks show up and they're there for weeks or months at a time, we do have boats taking people out to see the sharks, which is kind of cool, but it is completely unregulated. There are no rules for the boat operators. Sometimes they chum to draw the sharks close to the boats, even though there are kids swimming in the water. So there are a lot of things that are going to need to be adjusted in order to make these sorts of operations safe. So the other aspect of our program, it doesn't do us any good to collect all this scientific information and give it to the lifeguards, but not get it to the public. So we have a big public outreach program. One of the aspects of our program are called Shark Shacks, and we hit all the local beaches and all the piers several times throughout the summer. So we hit about 36 public beaches multiple times throughout the summer, and we do a lot of special events where we talk to the public about beach safety. We talk about what we're learning about sharks, stingrays, sea jellies, all the things that could potentially harm them, and how to stay safe when they're at the beach. In addition, we've developed a comic book for junior lifeguards. We had one that we developed on beach safety, and it was so popular that we developed another one on marine pollution. So we had paper copies. We've given out 50,000 copies of these to junior lifeguards throughout California. And now they're available online for free on the Shark Lab website and in both English and Spanish. So here's some tips this summer. So some of the things that we've learned is that typically you're safer in numbers. If you're going to swim or surf, do it at a public beach, do it at a guarded beach. We know that probability of being bitten or being an accident as a result of a shark biting a person means that if you're in a group, your probability of being bitten goes down. In addition, if you do get bitten, you have somebody there who can help you. Our biggest risk at most public beaches are not sharks. They're actually stingrays. So learning to do the stingray shuffle is really important. The lifeguards are smiling because they know they treat thousands of stingray injuries a year. Avoid dead and sick marine life. If you see things washed up on the beach, you should really kind of avoid those areas or let a lifeguard know. In addition, we always tell people if you see a shark, always keep your eye on that shark. Track it with your eyes, track it with your surfboard, let the shark know you see it. And quite often, they know the gig is up. And pay attention to other wildlife. When you're out and you're out in the lineup and a seal climbs up on your board, doesn't necessarily mean it wants to bond with you. It might mean it's trying to get out of the water because there's a shark nearby. Or if you're out on your board and there's a bait ball nearby, you may want to pull your arms and legs up because sharks will pass through those bait balls trying to catch fish, and you don't want your hand or foot mistaken as a bait item. So one of the new programs that we're initiating this summer is a study to examine people's perceptions of sharks and other marine wildlife. So we have a great survey and we're looking for people's input on this. In addition, we're conducting a study on the socioeconomic impacts of sharks in our coastal community. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a lot more information about what people think about sharks and how their learning more about them might change their perspective. So the bottom line, these studies have never been done ever in the US. They'll be the first time this will be done in the US, and they're being piloted in California. So obviously we could not do this work without funding, and we have to thank Assemblymember O'Donnell for helping us get funding from the state to do this work. We have the technology, we have the sharks, we just haven't had the funding to be able to do what we're doing. And we're one of the first in the world to do many of the things that we're doing and answer the questions that we are. In addition, we have all sorts of research and education partners. And the bottom line is we collaborate with every single beach city in California and Southern California in particular. And they contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars in in-kind support. The lifeguards are our research partners and education partners in this endeavor, and we could not do this work without them. So thank you.
Great. Great job, Dr. Lowe. You're always fascinating. I know I'll agree to listen to because you always bring great information and expertise and just interesting stories. So with that, we're going to turn to our Long Beach lifeguards. With us here again is Captain Omar Naranjo and Marine Safety Officer, if I got your classification right, I hope I did, Marine Safety Officer Bibi, who are going to share us a little bit about the lifeguards' role in ensuring shark safety and human safety along our beaches. To our lifeguards, our Long Beach lifeguards.
Good evening, Assembly Member. It's really good to be here. I think there's the three things that you mentioned. That fascination, it never really goes away. And just listening to Dr. Lowe, and I've been fortunate enough to hear a lot of his lectures, I'm always fascinated because I think that fascination when we're talking about shark never does go away. But two other things that you mentioned at the start were education and respect. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for this opportunity, because with the education comes the respect, and we're able to coexist. I think in 2016 and 17, listening to Dr. Lowe, it brought back some memories, because as you know, our junior lifeguard program here, we're talking about the summer season. It used to be June to Labor Day, but now it really goes April to October. And Dr. Lowe mentioned how April to October are when most of our sightings happen. And I remember 16, 17 vividly, because I actually happen to have 3 of my own daughters in the junior lifeguard program. And I had a 9-year-old, and those of you that are familiar with our program, the end of the program, the climax for it is really always the iron guard, where the kids get to do 4 miles of running all up and down the beach, every single tower, 2 miles of swimming, including the pier. And I remember vividly having to jump in and finish the iron guard that first year with my youngest daughter, Kelia, because she decided she was going to do the whole thing head up, because it was the year when we had a really large number of sightings. As Dr. Lowe talked about, we actually ended up doing about 20 jib taggings that we did with our lifeguards. So since then, on that education front, I think the lifeguards have come to have a much, much better understanding of what we're dealing with. And most importantly, understanding that this is a habitat, right? This Long Beach is a shark habitat, and acknowledging that was really the first step towards being able to educate not only ourselves, our neighboring lifeguard agencies, but also the public, the beach community, and importantly also our 781 junior lifeguards that are out there this summer. This is a record number for us this year. And so I think we've all grown. We've learned so much. We've always known that the stingrays were out here. So listening to Dr. Lowe about the things that sometimes make this appealing to some of those juvenile whites, it's really, that respect has grown, and now we're coexisting. Most importantly, though, the safety of all beachgoers, as well as our junior lifeguards, is always our utmost priority. That's our top priority. So we always take a very proactive approach. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about a little bit today. What are the things that we do out here? I think it starts with education. And so this is a great opportunity to have a platform to be able to talk about some of the things that we do, not just for our junior lifeguard parents. We also have hundreds upon hundreds of kiteboarders that visit our beaches every day, and other patrons. So being able to speak to the public is actually a really great opportunity. We do a lot of messaging via our social media platforms. And we do, and I'm gonna let, on that note, I'm gonna let Marine Safety Officer Devin Beebe about some of the things that we do with regards to messaging to get a lot of this education out to the public and to our junior lifeguard parents.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here. Happy to talk to everyone. So I've been working with the junior lifeguard program since 2015. And a big part of what we do is, like Captain Naranjo said, we like to have a proactive approach. And so part of that is just making sure that we have, accurate email lists and things like that, making sure that we're getting all of this information out to our junior guard families. I'm hoping you can all see the screen share right now, but safety of our junior guards and our beachgoers is obviously #1 priority. So some of the things that we do as a junior lifeguard program, we have instructors doing patrols out on PWCs. And then along with that, we have our lifeguards keeping an eye out daily. So I'm showing a video of our PWC patrol. And we also have the ability to deploy a drone as needed. If there are any sightings, we're able to use our drone to confirm. And so this has been a really valuable tool the past few years when there are sightings, along with our rescue boats. Obviously, there's a higher platform there, so better visibility. And this is just something that can be used if there is a sighting or if we just need to investigate. These are some of the tools that we have, along with those acoustic receivers that Dr. Lowe's lab has set up, and getting that information out to the captains, who can then pass that along to our program, and we can adjust everything accordingly. We're really lucky to be on a peninsula, so we have not only the ocean front, but also the bayside. So if there ever was a sighting or a report of a shark, we're able to adjust our activities accordingly and move everything over to the bayside as needed, which was done a few times in 2015 and 16. Yeah.
So hopefully you guys are all able to see the footage there of our rescue boat. So we do take a multi-pronged approach to how we respond anytime we have a report of a sighting. I mean, we always take it very seriously, and we want to confirm that sighting, investigate that sighting, because you'd be surprised. Oftentimes, you know, talking about the education, someone will call in a dolphin, pot of dolphins out there, and call it in as a shark sighting. But we take every single sighting very seriously. And we have operational captains that are on duty 24/7 that will send our rescue boats out there to patrol the area. As Devin already mentioned, we do PWC sweeps of the junior lifeguard area every morning at 8:30 before the start of the session. And we also just acquired actually an acoustic receiver from the Shark Lab. But even in years past, all the operational captains, the junior lifeguard coordinator and the assistant coordinator have the ability to have access to the Shark Lab and those pings, so that we know when we're out there. Like I said, we were fortunate enough to tag a lot of those juveniles back in 16, 17. So we now have a much more solid understanding. The 24/7 approach, it doesn't just apply to Long Beach, because as Dr. Lowe mentioned, the sharks do migrate. So one of the other collaborative efforts that we do is we work with all the other lifeguard agencies up and down the coast, and we stayed in constant communication. One of the things that we do is also standardize the signage. And I think most agencies now have gone to marking every lifeguard tower as, I think I mentioned, as a shark habitat, so that the public knows that these juveniles are out there. And when we have confirmed sightings, if you guys can look behind me, we also have warning and advisory signs, as well as closure signs in the event of an incident. So we have an incident action plan in place, and we also have policies that we adhere to here in Long Beach, and that we've standardized with other lifeguard agencies up and down the coast. So in closing, I would just say that, again, it's about education. I think I mentioned our lifeguards have definitely come a long way in the last 5 years. Our junior lifeguards, I can tell you now, my daughter's looking to win the Iron Guard this year, that same 9-year-old that was scared and swam half of it with her head up out of the water. So we've all come a really long way, and every opportunity like this is greatly appreciated. I know that we've, Dr. Lowe mentioned the shack that he brings to events. We've brought that to our picnic in the past, and other junior lifeguard and even non-lifeguard events throughout the city with Long Beach Unified School District. So every opportunity that we get where they can really get it from the experts really goes a long way. So we appreciate the continued support. And with that, we'll conclude, and we'll open it up to any questions.
Great, thank you. Well, hey, very informative again from our Long Beach lifeguards. And I knew you were working together, but I didn't know how much you were working together. So that's good for me to know as an advocate for the Shark Lab. It's good. It's a better story for me to tell up in Sacramento when we go to seek funding for efforts like these, because these efforts are very important, because they're about the safety of my community and also the safety of our marine environment. So just a couple questions from me. When I was a kid, we rarely saw seals, hardly ever saw dolphins. I don't remember seeing a dolphin as when I was young in the Long Beach area. They came up about 20 years ago, give or take, coming back a bit. But I've never seen a shark. So if I see a shark, should I report it? If I'm inside the breakwater, if I'm inside the marina, would they be in the marina? Talk to me a little bit about that.
That's actually a really good question. And yes, we always encourage it, because we always use all our available resources to investigate any sighting. Actually, a lot of our reports in 16 and 17 came not from junior lifeguards or the guards in the towers, but a lot of them came from our kiteboarding community. Because if you guys are familiar, they'll go out there, they'll be out a mile out at sea. And they were actually the first to report it that spring. early summer in 16 and 17. And so yes, with the tips, yeah, definitely always swim near our lifeguard and always report any sighting, because we take every sighting very seriously and we do investigate every sighting.
Great, great. So for Dr. Lowe, what are the most common misconceptions you run into when you discuss sharks?
So probably the biggest one is if you see a shark, it's going to bite you. And that we know is not true. In fact, in Southern California, I can't tell you the thousands of people we've seen sharks swim right underneath, and the people didn't even know they're there. So the thing that I always tell people, look, if you spend a lot of time in the water off California, I can guarantee a white shark has swum by you and you didn't know it. So the bottom line is just understanding that they're out there. And I think the drone footage is great. It shows people something that they can't see. And when they see it, they start to look at the sharks going, well, that doesn't match what I heard on Shark Week. Just because the shark's there, it doesn't mean it's going to bite me. And they're probably their best advocates. Using the drone footage is probably the best way to convince people that misconception simply isn't true.
Great. Just can you elaborate on this? You talked about having a shark forecast. I think also a stingray forecast, which I think is just as necessary. Having had a daughter on the surf team at Wilson who was stung by a stingray not too long ago. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. So we've done 20 years of research on stingrays at Seal Beach, Ray Bay, they call it, right? And they call it that for a reason. One of the things that we learned was that round stingrays, they're the ones that we call them white shark pancakes, basically, will aggregate at areas where you have fine sediments and warm water. Those are the two things they look for. And when the swell drops, the stingrays will come in closer to the shoreline. So we always call it kind of, stingray alert. When you see the swell drop and it gets really warm, that's when the lifeguards are going to get a lot of people coming up with injuries. And that's when we tell people you really need to do the shuffle. So when that swell starts to drop and it gets warm, those rays are coming up closer because there's more food in the sand for them. And we've done surveys out off Ray Bay where in the fall, in September, there are so many stingrays you cannot see the sand. They carpet the bottom. So
and maybe to our lifeguards, keep going, I'm sorry.
If you don't do the shuffle, it's literally your every step is going to be on a stingray.
So to our lifeguards, I'll jump over to them because I know they go into preschools and teach this, if I recall correctly. What is the stingray shuffle? Would you just educate everybody on this, just so everybody knows?
All right, so the stingray shuffle is when you're walking into the water. It's like you're knocking on the stingray's door. You don't want to just be stepping in because you're going to step right on one. And that's when they whip that barb around and sting you. So if you're shuffling through the water and you don't pick your feet up from the sand, you just shuffle through, you kind of give them a warning, a little knock, and you're not stepping on them and they can scurry away rather than sting you.
Okay.
And it works most of the time.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
Stepping on what I learned now is a white shark pancake, I believe, right?
White shark pancakes.
Great. Well, thank you. Thanks to all of you for your participation this evening. Why don't we close it out with Dr. Lowe, and then we'll go to our lifeguards. If you want to add anything in closing.
Well, I think the main thing that I want to talk about is, look, it's summer, everybody's going to the beach. You'll hear about sharks. There might even be signs posted at your beach. So far, we haven't seen any problem. So even though it is their nursery, we have to be good guests in their home. So this part about being respectful is important. Right now, we don't see any sign of sharks interacting or bothering people. But if people start going out and chasing those sharks around, that could change. So we always recommend just leave the sharks alone. They're there to try to find a safe place. And if you do that, they'll ignore you.
Great. And to our lifeguards.
Well, again, I think, like I said, we're all fascinated by this, and just say continue to educate ourselves with it. And I think our respect goes even bigger so that we can coexist. First bullet point, I would just say swim near a lifeguard, always swim near a lifeguard, and do the stingray shuffle and enjoy our beaches. We're going to have an epic summer.
Great. Well, thank you all for your wonderful presentations, your knowledge, and what you do for a living, because it helps us have a better and safer community. And I appreciate that, I know. And thank you very much. With that, I hope this was enjoyable, informative, and I hope everybody has a good evening. And remember the Stingray Shuffle, right? Thank you.